My name is Paul, and if I had to choose one night to go back to in my college life, I know exactly it would be the night we shared a bed. The night when both of us said just this once. As if that phrase could keep everything safe, neat, and without crossing any lines. Ashton entered my life in my sophomore year, in a very American way. One autumn evening, with the wind carrying the scent of dry leaves across the campus, and I was fumbling for a seat in cognitive psychology class. I saw him before he saw me. Taller than me by a bit, broad shoulders, dark blonde hair that always looked like it hadn't been combed properly, wearing a gray hoodie from the school's basketball team. Ashton had the kind of presence that made people unconsciously step aside. But when he smiled, everything softened. "Can I sit here?" Ashton asked, his voice deep and relaxed, as if we'd known each other for ages. I nodded. "Yeah." And that's how it started. We became study buddies, then coffee friends, then late-night library companions. I was the type who took careful notes with clear bullet points. Ashton remembered things by listening and asking. He often asked me questions that weren't in the books, ones that made me pause, think, and then laugh. And every time, I felt my heart skip a beat. I wasn't new to liking guys, but I was always the one who kept distance. I believed in naming things before touching them. Ashton was different. He lived as if tomorrow was always wide enough to fix mistakes. That night, it was raining. My dorm was older than Ashton's new building, with thin walls and a heating system that ran hot and cold. We just finished watching a basketball game on my laptop, the rain tapping on the window like a steady drumbeat. Ashton was sprawled on the floor, head resting against my bed, hands clasped behind his neck. "Stay over?" I asked, almost whispering, even though it was just us in the room. Ashton looked up. "If you don't mind." "No," I said too quickly. No, I don't mind." We both laughed. A short, distracted laugh, like to brush away something unsaid. My bed was only big enough for one, but dorm life was used to making do. I spread an extra blanket, planning to hug the edge. Ashton turned off the light. The room sank into the dim glow from the hallway light seeping through the door crack. "Just this once," Ashton said, his voice low, "so I don't get soaked going back." "Yeah," I replied, "just this once." We lay on our sides, backs to each other, with a small gap in between, an imaginary boundary. I could hear his breathing, steady and warm. I tried to focus on the rain, the ceiling, anything but the feeling of Ashton's arm just inches away. Then he turned over. I knew because the mattress dipped slightly. I knew because the warmth shifted. And I knew because my heart started beating faster, as if my body had been waiting for this moment for a long time. "Paul," Ashton called softly. "Yeah." "Are you cold?" I swallowed hard. "No." "A little." Ashton pulled the blanket higher, an unconscious motion. His hand brushed my arm. Just a touch, fleeting, but it sent an electric current down my spine. He froze. "Sorry," Ashton said immediately. "I didn't mean." "It's okay," I interrupted, so quickly even I was surprised. "Really?" There was a silence, thick and fragile. Then Ashton moved closer, very slowly, like asking permission with every inch. Our shoulders touched. I didn't pull away. "Just lying here," Ashton said, as if reminding himself. "Nothing else." "Yeah," I whispered. "Just lying here." I could smell the soap on his shirt, hear his breathing change, no longer as even as before. I realized I was facing him now. The dim light outlined Ashton's face. Straight nose, lashes casting shadows, lips slightly parted as if about to say something. I thought about all the times we'd been close without touching. Late nights at the library, quiet laughs in coffee shops, lingering glances longer than necessary. I thought about how Ashton said my name, like it was a promise. "Paul," he called again, closer this time. "If you don't want." I placed my hand on his wrist, light enough to pull back any time. "I do," I said, honest to the point it made my throat ache. "I'm just scared." Ashton didn't laugh. He looked at me, eyes serious and gentle. "Me too." We lay there, between fear and desire, between what could happen and what shouldn't. Outside, the rain still fell. In that small room, Two 20-year-old American guys learned to admit a simple and dangerous truth, that just this once could be the start of everything. We didn't kiss that night, at least not yet, but there are things more intimate than a kiss, like allowing someone to stay in the fragile space between friends and more. Ashton turned onto his back, the ceiling becoming the anchor for his gaze. I stayed on my side, facing him, my hand still on his wrist, warm and slightly trembling. No one spoke for a few minutes. That silence wasn't empty. It was so full I could feel it. Have you ever thought, Ashton spoke up, that college is like a time when you're allowed to make mistakes? I smiled faintly. I think people say that to feel less scared. What about you? He turned his head to look at me. Are you scared? I thought about it, then nodded. Yes, but not because of making mistakes. I'm scared. If I get it right. Ashton raised an eyebrow, a small smile appearing. Sounds dangerous. Yeah, I said. And you're in my bed, so? Just this once? Ashton repeated. But this time it sounded more like a sad joke than a boundary. We fell silent again. I pulled my hand back, then placed it again. This time on his chest, where I could feel his heartbeat, steady but strong. Ashton didn't stop me. He exhaled slowly, as if allowing himself to stay in this moment longer. Paul, he said, his voice a bit hoarse. Do you think we're making everything complicated? I think, I replied. Everything was already complicated. We're just facing it head-on. Ashton turned fully toward me. The distance between us was now just breaths. I could see every detail on his face. A small freckle near his temple, his lips curving slightly in hesitation. I wondered how many times I'd looked at him in safer circumstances, and why tonight everything felt so different. He raised his hand, touching my cheek. Warm fingers, slow, like asking if it was okay. I nodded almost without realizing it. We touched lips light, brief like a test. No rush, nothing crossing boundaries. But it was enough to tilt my world. Ashton pulled back first, our foreheads touching. Just that, he said, his breath on my lips. At least for tonight. I smiled, both relieved and regretful. Yeah. We lay back as before, but no longer back to back. I pillowed my head on my arm. Ashton faced me, one hand between us like a bridge. I drifted off without realizing, to the thinning rain and the familiar warmth of someone I hadn't dared name anything but Ashton. The next morning, sunlight filtered through the curtains. I woke first, realizing Ashton's arm was around my waist, very naturally, as if it had been there for ages. I didn't move right away. I just lay still, memorizing the feeling, the just right weight, the unconscious trust. Ashton opened his eyes, blinked a few times, then smiled. Morning. Morning, I replied. No one rushed out of bed. We talked about small things. Upcoming classes, essays due, what's for breakfast in the cafeteria. But between those fragmented sentences was a taut thread. Last night wasn't erased just because dawn had come. When Ashton got up, pulling his hoodie over his head, he paused at the door. Paul, he said. About last night. Yeah. Thanks, Ashton said, sincere, for not making it easier by pretending it didn't matter. I nodded. I think we should keep being honest with each other. Ashton smiled, his eyes lighting up. Sounds like a plan. He left, leaving the room familiar but no longer the same. I sat on the bed, touching the spot where he'd been, and realized that just this once was no longer enough to describe what was coming. The days that followed passed in a way both normal and strange, as if the campus had changed color and only I noticed. I still went to class, sat in my usual row, took careful notes. But every time my phone buzzed with a message from Ashton, a question about homework, a silly meme, or just coffee, my heart reacted before my mind could analyze. We didn't talk much about that night, at least not directly, but everything bore its mark. Ashton sat closer to me in class. His hand brushed my knee under the table when we both laughed at a professor's joke. I didn't pull away. We learned to exist in a new space, no longer just friends, but not yet daring to name anything else. One Friday evening, the library was busier than usual. Midterm season had everyone strung tight. Ashton and I claimed our usual corner, books spread out like a battle line. He leaned over to read my notes with me, shoulder to shoulder. "Have you noticed," Ashton said softly, "that we study better when we're sitting this close?" "I think," I replied, eyes still glued to the page, "it's because you ask fewer questions." "Not fair," he chuckled quietly. "I ask because I'm curious. And because you like distracting me," I said, but without blame in my voice. Ashton was quiet for a few seconds. "Paul." "Yeah. Do you regret it?" I turned to look at him. The library lights reflected in Ashton's eyes, making them look more serious. "Regret what?" "About that night." I considered the simplest answer, then skipped it. "No," I said, "but I'm not sure what I'm expecting either." Ashton nodded, as if he understood that feeling all too well. "Me neither." We headed back to the dorm later than planned. It was colder, wind whipping through the buildings. When we stood at my door, Ashton paused. "Do you want me to come in?" he asked, straightforward. I knew the question wasn't just about a room. I took a deep breath. "Yeah." This time, no rain. Just the quiet of a late night, and two guys standing in a small room that had witnessed too many private thoughts. Ashton hung his jacket, took off his shoes. I closed the door, leaning against it for a moment to steady myself. We sat on the bed, far enough apart not to touch, but close enough to feel. I talked about an upcoming essay. Ashton shared about his family in another state, about always having to act tough. The stories unfolded, layer by layer. "You know," Ashton said, his voice lowering, "I'm used to people thinking they know me, but usually they only see what's easy." I looked at him. "And me?" Ashton smiled faintly. "You look longer." That sentence stayed with me. I reached out, hesitated half a second, then placed my hand on his. Ashton held it back. This time, no one said, "Just this once." Maybe because we both knew it had lost its power. We lay down, keeping enough distance not to rush. I heard Ashton's breathing change, slow and deep. He turned toward me, his arm behind my head. Not pulling, just there, like an offer. "Paul," Ashton said very softly, "if you want to stop, I'll say," I replied. "And so will you." He nodded. We touched lips again, a little longer, but still gentle. Nothing beyond the silent consent we'd built. When we parted, foreheads touching again. "Where are we going with this?" Ashton asked. "I don't know," I said honestly, "but I want to go with you." Ashton smiled, a smile that warmed my chest. "Me too." That night we shared the bed, not as an accident, not as an exception. I woke in the middle of the night, realizing Ashton was asleep, his hand still on my back like an anchor. I didn't stir. I thought about the risks, the unanswered questions. But amid it all, there was a strange peace. Morning came, and with it, reality. We'd have to face friends, assumptions, our own fears. But when Ashton woke and smiled at me, a smile without hiding, I knew that no matter how complicated this got, I no longer wanted to go back to my old safety. Everything started getting harder than I imagined. Not because Ashton changed. He still smiled easily, still texted me at odd hours, still walked beside me on the campus's stone paths as if it were obvious. The hard part was realizing I was carrying a secret heavier than I'd thought. We weren't public. At least not yet. In a big American university where everything seemed open, the truth was everyone had corners to protect. Ashton was noticeable, the team, wide social circles, friends everywhere. I was used to standing on the sidelines, choosing safety. We had an unspoken agreement to go slow. Not out of shame, but out of respect for reality. But emotions don't know how to go slow. One night, I went with Ashton to a small party at his friend's apartment. Music played just loud enough to cover silences. I stood next to Ashton, cup of water in hand, watching him talk to others. Comfortable, confident. A few glances skimmed over us, lingering longer than needed. I didn't know if it was imagination or instinct. "You okay?" Ashton whispered in my ear. "Yeah," I said, then paused. "Maybe." Ashton nodded. placing his hand on my back, just a short touch, enough to remind me I wasn't alone. But I also noticed other eyes catching the gesture. My heart raced, not entirely from fear, but because I was standing at the edge between holding and letting go. We left the party early. On the way back, the cold wind numbed my cheeks. Ashton slowed to match my pace. "Sorry," he said. "I didn't want to make you uncomfortable." "You didn't do anything wrong," I replied. "I'm just learning to get used to this." Ashton stopped, looking at me closely. "Paul, we don't have to prove anything to anyone." I knew he was right, but knowing and feeling are two different things. The following days, academic pressure ramped up. I got swept into essays, deadlines, and questions without clear answers. Ashton was busier with practices. We met less, texted shorter. No conflicts arose, just gaps appeared. One late evening, while I was at the library, my phone buzzed. "Ashton, you back in your room yet?" "Me, not yet." "What's up?" "Ashton, I'm outside. Can we talk for a bit?" I packed up my books, my heart suddenly heavy. When I stepped out, Ashton was standing under the light, hands in his pockets, looking more tired than usual. "Hey," I said. "Hey," he replied, his smile not quite full. "Want to take a walk?" We circled the grassy quad where students gathered during the day. At night, it was empty and quiet. Ashton kicked a small pebble lightly. "I'm scared," he said suddenly. I stopped. "Of what?" "Of hurting you," Ashton said. "And of myself, that I'll want more than what you're ready to give." I took a deep breath. "I'm scared too," I admitted. "But not because you want more. I'm scared because I do too." Ashton turned to me, his eyes softening. "So what do we do?" I thought of my small bed, the nights we'd lain together without grand promises. "We keep being honest," I said. "And if we need to slow down, we slow down together." Ashton nodded, then pulled me into a hug. Not rushed, not showy. I rested my forehead on his shoulder, feeling the familiar breathing. In that moment, everything became simple. That night, we shared the bed again. No tension, no just this once. Just two people trying to learn how to be together without losing themselves. I told Ashton about my fear of being seen. He shared about the pressure to always be strong. We listened. As I was about to sleep, Ashton whispered, "Thanks for not running away." I smiled in the dark. "Thanks for staying." Outside, wind blew through the trees. Inside, I knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy. But for the first time, I didn't feel the need to hide from my feelings. I allowed them to exist, fragile enough, real enough. Everything changed at the end of the semester, in a way I hadn't anticipated. Not a big event, no dramatic scene or loud declaration. Just a late afternoon, when Ashton and I sat on the steps in front of the social sciences building, watching students pass like parallel streams. The sun was low, golden light draping over Ashton's shoulders, making him look both familiar and distant, as if I were glimpsing a future I hadn't dared name. "Paul," Ashton said, his voice calm but with something different. "Do you think we're hiding?" I was silent for a moment. The question hit the sore spot. "I don't think it's hiding," I said slowly. "I think it's learning to stand firm." Ashton nodded, but his eyes didn't leave the quad ahead. "I don't want to whisper forever." I understood. I'd understood for a long time. The issue wasn't that Ashton needed more. It was that I was gradually realizing I did too. I turned to look at him. "I'm not ready for everything," I admitted. "But I'm ready for you." Ashton smiled, this time without hesitation. "That's enough." That evening, we shared the bed again. The familiar room, but the feeling was entirely different. No longer a temporary shelter, but a space of choice. I lay on my side, head resting on Ashton's shoulder. He wrapped his arm around me, without hiding, without reserve. "Do you remember the first time we said, 'just this once'?" Ashton asked, his voice tinged with nostalgia. I chuckled softly. "I think that phrase is past its expiration." "Yeah," he laughed along. "Good thing." I looked up at him in the soft bedside light. "Ashton," I said, I don't know where this is going, but I know I don't want to go back to being a bystander in my own life. He leaned down, touching my forehead. We don't need to know all the answers, Ashton said. Just keep asking together. We kissed. Not as a test anymore, not something to second-guess every second. It was a kiss of acknowledgement, of two 20-year-old American guys learning to choose each other in a world full of other choices. The weeks after, we didn't suddenly become a public couple in front of the whole school. But we stopped pretending, holding hands on evening walks, sitting close in coffee shops, glances no longer averted. Some noticed, some asked. We answered in our own way, honest enough, safe enough. I realized fear doesn't disappear. It just shrinks when faced directly. And in that space, there's room for hope. The last night before winter break, snow began to fall. Ashton stayed in my room. We lay listening to the wind, watching snowflakes fade outside the window. Paul, Ashton said, his voice deep and sure. No matter what happens later, I don't regret it. I turned, facing him. Neither do I. I thought about the first night, about the phrase, just this once. I understood it wasn't a lie. It was just how we allowed ourselves to start. Gently, fearfully, but honestly. And from that time, we'd chosen to continue. We shared the bed, not to escape the world, but to prepare to step out together. I closed my eyes, hand gripping Ashton's, knowing that whatever the future held, I'd learned the most important thing from my college years. Love isn't losing control, but daring to be present, fully.